Hey everyone, I'm Sam from Cosplay. This is part 2 of the muscle suit tutorial series. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to carve and shape all the foam muscles like this so you can make your own muscle suit. Okay, I've got all my patterns cut out. Now I can transfer them onto foam. For this I'm going to be using upholstery foam. There are a couple different ways to cut out your foam to then get it the shape you want and attach it to your bodysuit. The way I'll primarily be doing it is just cutting out the foam and then shaping it, like carving the front and carving out the back. The other way you can do it is, instead of doing all the shaping on the top, when you cut it out, you can cut at an inward angle. So let's say like 45-degree angle. Then when you attach that piece to the bodysuit, you'll glue down the edges and it'll round over the top of the foam because there's more mass in the center than there is on the sides. So the sides will fold over and this center part will pooch out. This seems to work better if you're using it on the thinner foam, because the thinner foam is more flexible naturally and it won't tug at the bodysuit as much. Because when you glue it down, it is going to be pulling at the bodysuit because it wants to stay at its default shape, which is flat. If you're gluing it down, you're fighting what its natural shape wants to be. You can't heat form this like EVA foam. I like to use varying thicknesses though, like 2-inch foam for the chest. While I trace out my patterns, I'm going to stick a couple pins in them just so they don't slide around everywhere. Try to do my best to arrange things so I'm getting the maximum amount of foam and the least amount of waste. And first I'm going to be cutting out the muscles that'll be on the 2-inch foam. The way I determine which muscles are going to be which thickness of foam is the overall silhouette I'm going for. So this one, I want the upper body to be pretty thick, then have like a V taper, like a standard superhero build. And I just trace these on here with a Sharpie. And you want to always remember to label them as well. Especially with some of these rounder shapes, it's a good idea to put some marks on where the top and where the bottom is. To cut out the thicker 2-inch foam, I'm going to be using an electric knife like this. If you don't have one of these, you could also use a bread knife or another serrated knife, or you can just use one of these extending box cutters. This will cut through it fine. You just have to do a couple passes to get it all the way through. So sometimes this is a little bit quicker. In cutting it, I'm just doing my best to keep all the angles as close to 90 degrees as possible. So I'm trying to not go in or out. And this doesn't have to be exact. You can carve on the outside of the line, so there's a little extra room to shape this and whatnot. I've got the muscles that are going to be on the 2-inch foam cut out. Now I can start shaping them. I usually like to do all the muscles that are on one thickness of foam before moving on to the next thickness. I noticed that my foam has a bit of a curve to it already, just slightly. And I traced my patterns on the side that was curved inward. So I'm just going to flip these over and use the other side. That way it's already going to be conforming to my body a little bit better. So I just traced it on the other side. I may end up changing these muscles a little bit. I was doing some doodling on here. I might like this rounder shape a little bit better. To shape the foam, I'm going to be using one of these extending box cutters with the snap-off blades. You could potentially use the electric knife for this. Mine just doesn't do great at cutting in at an angle. I think it might be a little bit dull, and I just prefer this. When carving the muscles, I want to do it in a way that's going to conform to my body. So I'm going to be carving out the back and rounding over the front. Sort of as a rule of thumb for the chest, I do it thinner at the top and bigger at the bottom. First, I normally just go around and trim off this hard edge. And then I just start rounding it over. For the top, I'm going to come in a little bit steeper at first, just because I want that to flow into my body a little bit better. And then for the rest, I'm going to kind of come up at a steep angle and kind of round over as I go. You can also do it from the center outwards. Your knife will dull during this process, and for that I have this Kershaw knife sharpener. I usually spray it with a little bit of WD-40. And then just do a couple passes with the blade to get it sharp again. And as I'm doing this, with each pass I'm trying to hit any of the spots that have a ridge. Like here are some ridges. I want to go back and carve those away. Just always be carving away the ridges so it's a round shape. And the knife kind of has its own mass from the handle, but I'm doing my best to kind of lay it along the foam and do kind of small sawy motions to kind of skim the top of the foam off, and then applying more pressure if I want more foam to be taken off. And this can be a little bit tedious, especially if you're trying to get a specific shape. I think it's better to go slow than to take huge chunks off at once, because you can always take off more, but if you cut too much out and get a giant scalloped shape out of there, then you can't put it back. I also usually do the outside edge of the chest a little steeper than the inside upper edge of the chest. So I think this will blend in smoother than this, for example. This might have just a tiny little lump up. I still have a bit of shaping to do, but I want to make sure there's enough room to carve out the back still. So I'm going to go ahead and start carving some of the back out as well. And for that, I'm kind of just going to come in on the edge here and cut in at an angle. Might leave a little bit more mass down here at the bottom, some extra room there. To still continue to work with that. Then once I have a lip that I can pull up on, I'm going to go in and kind of cut that while I'm pulling up and kind of like make a scooping motion. You just want to be careful. You're getting your fingers out of the way. You can do tiny slow cuts for your first one to make sure you're not going to cut yourself and get a feel for where the knife's going to be. So that there's a little bit carved out. And then I want to put it on my chest and feel, is this going to be comfortable? Do I need to carve it out in more spots? That's feeling pretty okay. I want to smooth some of this out a little bit. I try to get the inside pretty smooth as well because I don't want ridges poking me in the chest. And then now I know how much foam I have to work with. I can keep shaping it because you don't want to poke through and have holes in your foam. You want to make sure you have enough material to work with all the way around. I try to use the flatness of the base foam to help me out a little as well, because I don't want any huge flat spots. So I know if there's a giant flat spot here, I need to keep rounding this over a bit. And then sometimes if I want this to round over and have an underhang, I'll even cut a little inward angle here at the bottom just so it starts to curve underneath. This I might even, instead of doing it rounded over this way, I might swoop it in this way. That way this humps out just a smidge. So then from the side we have a slight swoop in and then a little bit of a hump out. Pretty subtle, but it doesn't always have to be a big drastic change. If it's just like a subtle little thing that feels right, then that's okay too. I think I'm going to try that on the bottom as well, swooping it in just a little bit and having this curve under. So I'm kind of sawing and turning the knife inward as I go, and then same thing on the other side from the other angle. So making this round over and then back out to go back into the body. Then we'll get just a little bit of that overhang onto the chest there. I did another test fit on the mannequin and held this up to myself, and I think this is going to run into my shoulder a little bit. It's going to cause this to wrinkle up when I move my arm forward, so I think I'm going to chop this out. And then I can just leave it like that. You know, I can see how it's going to flow into the shoulder if I need to round that, if I need to taper it in this way so it goes over top the shoulder. Right now what I'm doing is I'm holding the foam down and then I'm trimming this so that it's flat. And since it's curved, when I let go, it's going to be tapered that way. I'm actually going to trim off this little dip that I did at the top here. I'm just not loving it. That's okay. You can keep making changes right up until it's attached to the suit. Even then you can make some changes. You can maybe tell this is why I like to do the carving instead of the cutting an angle on the edges and gluing it down, just because I like to have control over most of the shapes. Now I'm going to carve the other one to match. It's usually good to do them in pairs. That way you can make sure both the mirroring muscles are relatively close. They don't have to be 100% identical because bodies aren't 100% identical on both sides. Now I can move on to the smoothing. For that I'm going to be using a Dremel in this pretty rough low grit sanding drum. When you're dremeling the foam to smooth it, you just want to skim the very top of the foam and basically apply no pressure. If you apply pressure, it's going to take gouges out and there's a chance that the foam is going to get caught on the tool and wrap up, and it's going to be flopping around everywhere. It'll throw it off in a direction. If that happens and it's all wrapped up in the tool and it's just flopping around, you can just turn it off and slowly unwind it and it should be okay. But you always want to go in the direction that the tool's rotating. This one, for example, has an arrow indicating which direction it's going to rotate. You just want to be very gentle. Like I said, just skim the top and just go slow. And we're just going to try to get rid of all these little peaks. You can keep carving to get those peaks off and slowly whittle them all away, but this is the method I like to do. You'll also want to wear a dust mask or a respirator because there's going to be a lot of little foam particles flying around. Alright, so the dremeling's done. You can see I'm covered in the foam dust. There's still going to be a little bit of fuzziness on the foam though. So to get rid of all the fuzzies, I just take the knife and with a thumb on the side of the blade, put it up against the foam and then just push and scrape off all the little fuzzies. And I do this pretty quickly, but you may want to start out kind of slow so you get a feel for what you're doing. You'll see all the fuzzies covering the blade. I just wipe it off on my pants. If you don't have a rotary tool of any sort, and you're not comfortable using it to sand the foam, you can also do this to kind of shave down some of the peaks. So we'll try to focus on like this one. Kind of hit it at different angles as I go. You can kind of scrape it away that way. So that's also an option if all you have is a knife and your foam and you don't want to buy any more power tools. That's mostly what it is to shaping the foam. I'll show a couple more of the muscles just to show which side I leave the weight of the foam on, where I make it thicker, where I make it thinner, just so you know kind of how I do some of the muscles. But if you've gotten all the information you need from up to this point, then thank you for watching. Follow me on social media and consider liking. If you want to stick around, we'll do a few more muscles. A couple other things to note when dremeling the foam. If you want to go quickly and you don't want to accidentally mash into the foam too much, you can just put your finger on the underside of the tool here and use that kind of as a guide so you don't dip in too much. So if you just put the pressure on your finger instead of the pressure on the front of the tool, you can control how much you're dipping down into the foam a little bit better, I find. If you're way back here on the tool, it's easier to get a little bit squirrely, but up here you can kind of finesse it a little bit more. Alright, now I'm going to work on the back of the arm, the tricep. Basically for this, I'm just going to try to make it look like a long butt. If it looks like a long butt when we're done, then it's a success. This side's going to be a little bit taller and already a little bit longer than this side. So we're going to start by, like the other pieces, rounding around the edge. I'm going to trim off some of this excess first. Get a little bit rounder just to make it easier for us later. So like all the other pieces, I'm going to start by rounding out this edge. But then we're going to continue up on this line to like there-ish. And then we'll come on this side and do a slightly less steep angle, but try to do it deeper into the foam. So that's the basic shape we're going to work off of. I'm just going to do the normal shaping, but continue to do this sort of thing in this middle section as I go. Also thinner at the top, bigger at the bottom, and generally round everywhere else. You can also just do these in two separate pieces if you don't want to try to carve out the crease and do it all in one piece. That's fine too, and then you just overlap them later. But that would just be two round shapes, so I figured this would be a little more technical to show. Start to get a little thin on this top edge, so I'm going to go ahead and trim out the back. I can see this piece here, a little bit too steep on this edge. We want that to kind of flow in a little more subtly. So all of this I want to take out. Alright, so there's that one carved to shape. I've already done the second one. See, they both got that crease in the middle there. The longer section being a little bit higher than the shorter section here. Now I'm going to go pop them on the body for a test fit. Here you can see I've got this pinned on along with one of the biceps. Makes this nice shape in the middle here. It sets up slightly higher than the bicep. Come around the back. See, it tucks up next to the shoulder. This one I like the shape of the top of a little better. It kind of bridges the gap between the tricep and the shoulder a little bit better. Now I'm going to work on the back muscles. I'm going to edit them a little bit from what I had before. First, I trace them on this side, and as you can see, it's curving the opposite way. So I'm just going to flip them like I did with one of the previous pieces. Then I think I'm going to end up ending this right below the collar. So I marked that out on the pattern where that would be. So I'll go ahead and transfer that over as well. Got to hollow it out a little bit on the back. I test fit it. I think it's going to fit okay. Going to keep carving now. So currently with the back, I'm test fitting it on the body, seeing where the curvature is, and then trimming it to my liking. We don't want it to look like it has a hunchback, and we want it to taper in at the waist. I'm trying to go for a superhero-esque V-taper. So we're looking at this. If there's any high spots, like on the other sections, I'll mark it like this. And then put some lines this way so I know carve this off. I think maybe that needs to taper in just a smidge more to blend in with that. Then up around the neck, I'm still leaving some extra room just because as the foam is trimmed off of this starts to splay out more and it gets a little bit wider. So this will end up being just a smidge wider than the untrimmed piece by a little bit. So I'm still leaving that just to see how much it's going to curve up over the shoulder there, how much I'm going to have to work with before I trim it off for the collar. Right now I'm just focusing on getting the shape of the back. I've got both the back muscles carved. I think they're in a place where I like them. Alright, I'm going to do the biceps now. These are basically just going to be rounded all the way around. Pretty consistent in where the thickness is. If you want, you could do them thicker at the top than at the bottom to make them look like they're flexed. This bicep's looking pretty good. Got it pinned down here. You see it comes down a little bit further than the tricep on the back. I have it tucked under the shoulder just a little bit. I may end up tapering it down on the top a little bit more. Right there you can see there's a slight lump right in there. We'll just go ahead and mark that. This is flowing in pretty okay. You know, it could maybe lose a little bit right in there. Otherwise, biceps relatively easy. Yeah, I think you want the bulk of the thickness somewhere in the middle and then just taper it in so it doesn't look too bubbly like you've just got big humps coming out of your arm. All right, now we've got our first 1-inch pieces of foam. But this one's going to be for the lower back. I'm not going to show a ton of this. It's just going to be rounded over like the upper back really. And this will be up under the chest for like the rib cage, the first ab area. That we're going to taper on the edges, taper up on the top, leave most of the bulk on the bottom and try to round this over. I know I wanted to kick out the chest a little bit. I'm not entirely sure how much yet. We're going to have to test fit it. I think it definitely needs to come in a little bit more on the sides here to get that sort of V taper. Might even take the knife just while it's on here and just start trimming away. So that's already looking a lot better. Don't love the way it's just flat in the front there. So on the other side here I've started tapering this in as well. I'm going to just try to do a taper down from the pec to the bottom. And I ended up moving it up a little bit further under the chest than I originally planned. It was just looking a little bit too long. I think I might also cut in a little rounded spot down here at the bottom and maybe carve a little separation there as well, just to give it a little bit more definition. So here I've cut out a little rounded section here, just pop, pop. And now I'm gonna try to cut out a little V. I already did this side. I just did a real shallow cut inward, and then on the other side I'll do the same thing, just a shallow inward cut. Take that out so now you can see I have that definition there. I can try to go in and gently round that over. Might be easier to hold it this way and round it up this way. Just give it a little bit of definition there. Still debating on if I want to come in and do this sort of thing. I decided to go ahead and redo this lower back muscle here, mainly due to the way it looks on the front and the side here, so you can see compared to the old one. This one's just kind of flat and consistent all the way through. The new one over here has a lot more bulk right here on the side. So if I flip it over to the front, you can see here on the side there's some of the back muscle peeking over and helping give that sort of V-taper look. On the other side, not really anything there, it's just kind of flat. Also gone in and I've added another set of abs up here right below the pecs. These just mimic the shape of the piece underneath. I just thought it needed a little bit more of a transition from the chest down to the stomach. So I was trying some different things and I thought this ended up looking pretty cool. I don't usually love adding a separate piece of foam over top of another piece of foam, but I don't think I would have been able to get this sort of shape by just carving it out of the one piece of foam. I would have had to use 2-inch and then carve this steep curve and then flatten this out and carved another curve, so this was probably the easiest way to do that. All the other ab muscles, these are just rounded over, nothing particularly fancy. With this one going down to the crotch, you can choose to split this in half at the top if you want. Alright, I've got most of the muscles carved out, so I'm just going to run through them real quick and show you what I did on each of them, and then if you have any questions you can ask in the comments. So I showed these back muscles. Those are basically the same still. I still haven't trimmed at the top yet because I haven't cut out this collar yet. These bits right here underneath the shoulder, these are just rounded over in the back. Nothing too exciting there. This section right below the back, the lower back here, what I ended up doing is I carved this out of 2-inch foam. It still has most of its thickness at the top, and then it tapers down towards the bottom, closer to maybe 1/2 inch. Its thickest part is on this side here, so that when it's going to be attached on there, that's going to be peeking over the front. I think I showed some of that earlier. So for the shoulder, I ended up doing this in 3 pieces. You can see these two kind of crescent moon shapes. This one on the back flares out a little bit more. It's just kind of rounded over pretty evenly this way up to this point, and then just a sharp taper from this point back down this way, if that makes sense. And that's so it will hook over top of this center piece. The front one, basically the same thing. I Just round it over to the edge, and then from the center, just carved out so it matches this centerpiece. A little bit thinner at the bottom than it is at the top. And then the back is just hollowed out so it'll fit my shoulder. So it's a little bit flatter here, a little bit more curved up at the top there. That's going to depend on your body though, how much you're going to carve that out. Continuing down on the body, we have the butt cheeks. These started out as 2-inch foam. They're tapered quite a bit up at the top just so they flow into my lower back. And then down at the bottom, just a little bit more thick, give that butt cheek look. And on the side, the side's pretty tall as well. It's hollowed out a lot, but it's got the height there. I might still carve out this little crescent moon shape. When your butt muscle flexes, it gets sort of that crescent moon shape on the side, so that might make it look a little more muscular. Haven't really decided yet. I might hold some fabric over it and see how it looks. And I have those overlapping these thigh pieces here. I think that's gonna look pretty cool. For the thighs, on the back here, we have these two, I think these are 1/2-inch pieces, or it might even be 1 inch carved down. I don't remember. That's what they look like. And those were just not carved out too much, basically just rounded over everywhere, nothing too special. And that's gonna make a diamond shape here behind the knee. So these calf pieces, these are the most recent ones I've done. I only have one side done even, I don't have the other one done yet. This one's just like a bean shape, and this was 1-inch foam, just rounded over. Nothing really exciting with that one either. Now the other side of the calf, these ended up being a little bit weird. I mean, this is something you could do in 2 pieces as well, but I did this all out of 1 piece of 2-inch foam and basically carved in a hump there and trimmed this down to like 1 inch. So we've got a big round section, and then this comes down to like 1 inch. And then it's very hollowed out on the back. It's kind of hard to see because of the white foam. There you can kind of see it. Looks weird there, but when it wraps around, it kind of gives that side of the leg bulk, and then like that front of the shin, how the outside edge of your shin has a little bit more meat on it than the inside edge. The inside is kind of just this piece poking around the front, and then your shin bone. So here I've got it flipped over, and then we'll work our way up. So here you can see kind of what I was talking about, how this will peek over the front, and then give a little bit of mass to the front there on the shin. This still has a bit of work to go, but you can kind of imagine what that'll look like when it's smoothed out. Coming up to the thighs, we've got the 2 bean shapes. These are both pretty evenly rounded. This one's tapered in a bit at the top. This one's a little bit bulkier here down by the knee, just so you hit the knee and then you have a little bit of a steep overhang coming out. And then this one was gonna be a teardrop, but I didn't love the way it was flowing up into the hip, so I elongated it and made it this sort of shape. This one as well, pretty bulky at the bottom, so the knee hits and then this juts out a little bit. And then like the middle one, pretty nice taper into the hip. I already went over the abs and the chest. That's all looking the same. The last section is the forearm. Now, I don't love this forearm. I ran out of 2-inch foam, so I figured I'd try to do it in 1 inch, and I just don't think it has the depth I'd like. So ideally, what we would have is some bulk coming out here, and then tapering in to the wrist. Can't really get that bulk with the 1 inch. And the store was out of 2 inch. I think we're going to end up gluing 1/2 inch to 1 inch, which isn't ideal, but might be what I have to do. And then I'll be able to round this over more and then taper it back into the wrist. Those shapes aren't super complicated. Here's what those will look like. They'll kind of hook into each other like a little puzzle piece. And then on the back side, they'll also hook together sort of like that, and they'll form a little V for the elbow, much like the back of the legs. I'm really happy with how the chest came out on this one. That's probably my favorite part, and why I like to do the carving, just so I can achieve these sorts of little minute shapes within each of the muscles. If you have questions, leave them down below or send me a message on Instagram. If you make a muscle suit using this tutorial, let me know. Send me a message or shoot me an email. If you're just working on something in general you'd like me to see, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. Follow me on social media. In the next part of this tutorial series, I'll be showing you how to attach the muscles to the suit. I'll have links to everything down below, and thank you for watching.